Assassin's Creed Shadows is a game with pretty extreme expectations. It's the first mainline series entry since 2020's AC Valhalla, the first AC game built exclusively for current-gen consoles, and it's a game that probably needs to be a big commercial success for beleaguered publisher Ubisoft. We've seen how the game meets technical expectations on the original trio of current-gen consoles, but this is a title with some substantial pro enhancements, highlighted by additional ray tracing. So how does AC Shadows fare on Pro? Is this an iterative upgrade or a revolutionary one? Shadows has one of the largest Pro upgrades we've seen so far. The key mode here is the performance mode, and the big boost comes down to RTGI. The Pro has it, and the PS5 doesn't. The PS5 Pro gets a lavish pass of per-pixel RTGI, bouncing light through each space to capture a realistic indirect diffuse lighting response. In a lot of scenes, the game is totally transformed. Just look at how accurately shaded the barrels are here, how pockets of shade bloom towards the base of the bamboo stalks. The game just looks so great on PS5 Pro in these instances. The PS5 in contrast looks overly flat and compressed during these scenes, with a more uniform lighting response. Foliage is a particular sore point. The PS5's lighting solution fails to capture the subtle occlusion you get from bunches of leafy greenery, giving it a dull, artificial look. Running through this forest area, the difference is unbelievably vast, with a generational divide in lighting fidelity. The base console is apparently using an evolution of the baked GI solution from prior Anvil Engine titles, but it largely fails to capture the kind of lighting detail that we've seen in recent Assassin's Creed games like 2023's Mirage. Shadows is a much larger game, and achieving good lighting fidelity without RTGI is more challenging. Shadows' baked GI also doesn't adapt to changes in the environment, like when we open and close this door, unlike the Pro code. The addition of RTGI is ultimately a pretty huge uplift over the base console. In a lot of lighting conditions, the PS5 Pro version almost looks like a totally different game. But one consequence of that RTGI call is that image quality on Pro isn't really improved over the base machine. Both suffer from considerable pixel crawl even at rest. Blocky patterns emerge on moving edges, and transparencies are poorly upscaled, with obvious signs of a low-resolution source. I've disabled chromatic aberration and motion blur for these comparisons to provide the clearest picture. Ubisoft stated pre-launch that both PS5 Pro and PS5 in their performance modes would use an upscaling process to hit 4K, and that seems to be borne out by the final code as well. The upsampling produces somewhat variable results though, in terms of achieving a sharp 4K appearance. Internal resolutions in light scenes on both consoles hovered around 1080p in gameplay in my tests. The RTGI is apparently eating up most of the additional margin of GPU time on the Pro. But some of Ubisoft's pre-launch Pro promises haven't quite materialized in the finished game. Ubisoft said that the game would use PSSR upscaling on Pro in press material published last September, but the Pro version of the game doesn't carry the hallmarks of PSSR upscaling. This occluded detail is fizzly, not blurred. The edge detail is very sharp, and in general, the image has artifacting that is more in line with analytical techniques than machine learning-based ones. The most obvious evidence, of course, is just the fact that the PS5 and Pro look so incredibly similar in image quality terms. In my tests, the PC version with Anvil's TAAU proves a pretty close match for both PS5s, so it looks like that's the solution of choice on both consoles. Presumably, Ubisoft found this was a better solution in total for the game than PSSR. Beyond the ray tracing boost on Pro, the game has pretty similar visual settings on both machines. Draw distances, shutter resolution, and other common tweakables seem to be about the same on both consoles. Frame rates here land at a consistent 60 FPS. There are exceptions. Some moments in the introductory sequence cause significant frame rate drops, and occasionally open world traversal can provoke a minor dip. Cutscenes run at 30 FPS, as does the hideout area. The hideout presumably runs at a lower update to accommodate the potential for greater player-created complexity, and to provide space for the addition of RTGI on the base PS5. Sometimes moving the camera rapidly can also cause a slight frame rate drop, where I think the game's DRS system is just not quite keeping pace for that moment. The base console is very similar in my experience, logging framerate dips of a similar magnitude in the same moments. That's kind of surprising, given that ray tracing often imposes substantial CPU demands. It's common for PS5 Pro games with ray tracing to run at a slightly choppier clip than their more heavily rasterized PS5 counterparts. Overall, I think AC Shadows is tremendously improved on Pro, even if image quality and performance remain imperfect. The addition of RTGI is an absolute game changer here. If possible, it would be nice to see RTGI on the base console, even if it meant taking a big clarity hit or other settings compromises. Shadows really feels like it was built with RTGI tech as a visual baseline. But there is one bit of ray tracing nicety that neither console gets in performance mode. The reflections look good when you can simply rely on SSR, but when we push the camera down here, we get the usual basic cube map fallback, which is often aligned poorly and low resolution. The PS5 Pro doesn't provide RT reflections to fix this in the performance mode, unfortunately. But quality mode is a different story. Here we see another ray tracing split between the consoles. Both have RTGI, but only the PS5 Pro gets RT reflections. In practice though, the effectiveness of the reflections is a bit limited. There isn't much detail in the reflections, revealing a fairly crude approximation of the world in the BVH. Even on a rippling water surface, it's evident that the fidelity to actual in-game assets isn't really there. It's kind of hard to tell at times, but foliage doesn't appear to animate in the reflections as well. The biggest issue here though is that the RT reflections suffer from a lot of pop-in. It can be quite distracting. Further afield, the RT reflections are colorless, textureless silhouettes, and very distant geometry isn't represented at all. Perhaps as a consequence, Shadows mainly relies on an SSR technique to fill in specular detail on water surfaces. Even when RT reflections are turned on, more granular detail, including skinned objects, are represented only in screen space. I do think that the ray tracing is a decent perspective-correct fallback to use when screen space information isn't available, but it doesn't seem to make an especially transformative difference most of the time. Outside of the RT reflections divergence, other visual settings appear fairly similar. RTGI is present on both machines and generally looks pretty comparable. At times though, there are some pretty substantial improvements from the added specular detail on Pro from the additional ray tracing. Other tweakables seem pretty similar across both machines, without an obvious divergence in my tests. Image quality is generally comparable across both machines. Neither is perfect, though both offer a less artifact-ridden image than their performance mode counterparts. I expect TAAU is again in use here, owing to the similar image quality quirks between the various mode and console configurations. Resolution is similar between the two machines, though I spotted a small Pro advantage in the shots I counted. Performance is very good here. Expect a locked 30 FPS in the vast majority of gameplay, including cutscenes, battle sequences, traversal, and the hideout. The game can drop a frame in some circumstances, but it's generally a very consistent performer. Base PS5 offers essentially the same update here, with strong performance as well. If we circle back to the performance mode and compare the two PS5 Pro modes directly, there are some obvious settings differences. Shadow resolution is upgraded in the quality mode, as is foliage density. Performance mode also appears to drop the game's strand-based hair during gameplay, though it is present in cutscenes in both modes. RTGI is present at a similar quality level in the two modes, but only the quality mode features RT reflections as well. Image quality is another key area of divergence, as the quality mode is less prone to pixel crawling, serrated edges, and other visual gremlins. It can also appear subtly sharper in some circumstances too, but there is one final mode available on Pro, a 40 FPS mode that's only available at 120Hz output. In a lot of games, this would basically function as a slightly downgraded quality mode, but here it's more like an extended performance mode. RTGI is in, but RT reflections are out. Interestingly, this is another shift from some of the pre-launch press materials, which said that the balanced mode on Pro would feature both RT effects. Elsewhere, the visual selectables come in somewhere between the other two modes. Quality mode and balanced mode both use strand-based hair during gameplay, for instance, but shadow map resolution in balanced mode is similar to the performance mode. Relative to the PS5 balanced mode, we're basically at parity here in terms of visual settings. Both have RTGI, no RT reflections, and fall on the same side of the hair rendering and shadow map divide. I can't really compare image quality directly owing to capture limitations on my capture system, but pixel counts do suggest a higher resolution on Pro, and it does look cleaner as well. Both are upsampling to 4K, so they produce a sharp final image. Both consoles basically nail their 40 FPS updates here, with a consistent 40 FPS in typical play. Again, there are two main exceptions, cutscenes and the hideout area, both of which run at 30 FPS. I came away from Assassin's Creed Shadows really impressed with the technical package that Ubisoft has assembled. There are so many neat technical touches here, from the dynamic wind and particle systems that make the world feel alive, to the Metal Gear Rising style environmental slicing, to the headlining, virtualized geometry and RTGI effects. Shadows presents a beautifully realized open world environment that really draws you in, and it's up there with the most convincing worlds in video games. It's a lot of fun to play as well, with simple but satisfying combat that is delightfully visceral. The PS5 Pro upgrade here is pretty enormous in its 60 FPS performance mode, which honestly looks generationally improved over its base console counterpart. The RTGI does seem to have a considerable performance impact here, but it's absolutely critical for lighting in this particular title. It's hard to overstate how diminished the game is without the technique. Quality mode and balanced mode get more moderate boosts. The headlining change here is the addition of RT reflections, which do make reflections look more accurate when screen space information isn't available. Ultimately though, the performance mode offers a really compelling combination of visual quality and good frame rates that's hard to beat, and I suspect that's what most players will prefer. In that context, this is possibly the most transformative PS5 Pro upgrade we've seen so far. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for YouTube notifications. Check out the Patreon at digitalfoundry.net for exclusive and early access content, and to get in touch, use social media. Thanks for watching.